A dream trip turns into a nightmare. On the 10th of January 2011, in the picturesque setting of a luxury resort in Mauritius, newlyweds Michaela and John McAreavey should have been living the happiest days of their lives. Just 10 days earlier, they had celebrated a beautiful wedding in Ireland, surrounded by family and friends. Michaela, radiant in her gown, had walked down the aisle, full of hope for the future. But that afternoon, while her husband had waited for her at lunch, Michaela returned to their room briefly and never came back. Within hours, the dream honeymoon had spiraled into a nightmare. Michaela was found dead in the very room she and John had shared. The news hit Northern Ireland like a thunderbolt. A young woman, beloved and admired, murdered in paradise. As the investigation unfolded, it would expose shocking details, unanswered questions, and a trial that left the world stunned. A life of faith and joy. Michaela Hart was born in 1983 in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland. The only daughter of Mickey Hart, one of Ireland's most famous Gaelic football managers, Michaela grew up in a family that was both close-knit and well known across the island. She was described as kind, gentle, deeply religious, and devoted to her family. A schoolteacher by profession, Michaela was also known for her strong Catholic faith, which shaped her life and gave her a sense of purpose. Friends remembered her as someone who lit up a room, whose warmth and compassion left a lasting impression. By her late 20s, Michaela was engaged to John McAreavey, himself from a respected sporting family. Their wedding in January of 2011 was a huge celebration, attended by hundreds and featured widely in local news. Everyone agreed it was the start of a fairy tale. But just days later, that fairy tale was brutally torn apart. The day of the murder. On the afternoon of the 10th of January, John and Michaela had been enjoying a meal together at the Legends Hotel, a luxury beachside resort. At some point, Michaela mentioned she was heading back to the room to fetch biscuits for tea. John stayed behind, expecting her back within minutes. When time passed and Michaela didn't return, John grew anxious. He eventually went to look for her, only to stumble upon a scene that would haunt him forever. Michaela was found in the bathtub of their hotel suite. She had been strangled with such force that her injuries were immediately obvious. The room showed no sign of forced entry, but it became clear quickly that this was not a simple accident. Michaela had been murdered. The suspicion falls on hotel staff. The Mauritian police moved quickly. With no evidence of a break-in, suspicion turned inwards towards hotel employees. Soon, two men were arrested, Avinash Tribhuwan and Sandeep Monia, both hotel workers. Prosecutors alleged that the two men attempted to rob the couple's room, believing it was empty. When Michaela unexpectedly walked in, they panicked, attacked her, and strangled her to silence her. The evidence, however, was extremely thin. Police claimed that Tribhuwan had confessed, but he later insisted that the confession was forced under duress. Other forensic evidence was disputed, and quickly questions arose about how the investigation was being handled. A stunning verdict. In 2012, the two men went on trial. The case was watched closely, not only in Mauritius, but across Ireland and the UK. For Michaela's family, it was a grueling experience, listening to graphic testimony, reliving the horror, and just waiting for justice. But after weeks of hearings, the jury delivered a shocking verdict: not guilty. Both men were acquitted of all charges. The decision sent shockwaves through Northern Ireland. Michaela's family were devastated, left with no sense of closure, and furious at what they saw as a botched investigation and failed prosecution. For them, Michaela's killer had escaped justice. A family broken, a nation in mourning. The murder of Michaela McAreavey was not just a personal tragedy, it was a national one. She was the daughter of one of Ireland's most prominent sporting figures, a symbol of youth and hope, and she was murdered in a foreign country under circumstances that still remain unclear to this day. Her father, Mickey Hart, who had led Tyrone to multiple All-Ireland championships, was suddenly thrust into the role of grieving parent. His words in the aftermath were heartbreaking, as he tried to articulate the pain of losing his only daughter. John McAreavey, Michaela's husband of just 10 days, was shattered. His life had been turned upside down in the cruelest way imaginable. Over the years, John has spoken publicly about his grief, his attempts to rebuild, and his continued hope that one day the truth about Michaela's death will come to light. An unfinished story. More than a decade later, the murder of Michaela McAreavey remains unsolved. The acquittals left the case in limbo, and for her family, justice feels as far away now as it did back in 2011. The image of Michaela, a radiant bride, just days before her death, haunts anyone who remembers the story. A life full of promise, cut short in a moment of violence that should never have happened. For Northern Ireland, the case stands as one of the most shocking, heart-wrenching crimes in modern history. A young teacher, a beloved daughter, a newlywed wife, taken in paradise, leaving behind only questions and grief. And as long as those questions remain unanswered, the story of Michaela McAreavey will never truly be over.